It's almost time for fantasy football, and we are gearing up this summer, mocking, drafting, looking at different analysis. And today we are joined by one of the best in the business. He's Andy Holloway. He joins us next. This is the Fantasy Football Fellowship podcast, also being featured on the Unpacking It podcast feed as well. Our weekly Fantasy Football Fellowship podcast takes fantasy concepts and relates them to life and faith. Look for a new episode later this week. But on today's special episode, we are joined by guest Andy Holloway to unpack fantasy, faith, and life with him. Before we jump in, let me remind you that Fantasy Football Fellowship is starting up, and from now throughout the season, we will provide weekly content. We've got weekly breakouts, we've got a weekly podcast, and our breakouts are where we take fantasy concepts, relate them to the Bible, relate them to life, and when you sign up to be a member for free, you gain access to all of our content, and it is designed for you and your league to discuss and enjoy throughout the season. Talk a little fantasy, talk a little life, talk a little faith with your league. So play fantasy football with purpose and grow in your faith all season long with Fantasy Football Fellowship. Check out fantasyfootballfellowship.com. And joining us now, one of our favorite guests we've had on this show. He's back after 4 years. It's Andy Holloway. He's one of the founders and co-hosts of the award-winning #1 listened to fantasy football podcast in the world, the Fantasy Footballers. It's an independent podcast that produces fantasy football content all year long. The show has now been nominated for or won more than 40 industry and podcasting awards. Be sure to check out their ultimate draft kit. I've got it. It's awesome. You can download the app as well and get great content, analysis, rankings, everything you need to win at fantasy football. It's the ultimate draft kit. Check out thefantasyfootballers.com. Andy is married. He's a father of 3. He's the author of My Football Family, one of the favorites in the Johnson household. So we will talk about that today as well. Andy, it's great to have you back on Unpacking It and our Fantasy Football Fellowship podcast. How you doing?
I am doing well. I cannot believe it's been 4 years since we chatted, but appreciate the introduction. Happy to be on the show.
All right, man. Well, we are psyched about it. And before we jump in, the summer, of course, it's fantasy time. But have you had the opportunity to get away, a little summer vacation? What's been the highlight of the summer so far?
Yeah, our family got to. I got to take the kids up to Lake Tahoe,
Nice.
which was someplace that my wife and I visited for an anniversary trip a few years ago. And so once we had gone and seen it and experienced it, we said someday we'd take the kids back there. And we got the chance to do that, which was sitting by the lake, which was, jet skis, going out on the boat, enjoying the beach, all of the good things that Lake Tahoe represented. So we got a week away. It took the 3 of us on the show, like, I don't know, a good 7 years to realize we should schedule vacations at the same time and then just pre-record those shows. We were always like competing for certain weeks of the year so the other 2 would do the show and one of us would get out of town with the family. We finally wisened up. It took forever. And we all got out of town and got a break and kind of refreshed a little bit before we get into, our busiest couple of months of the year before the season starts going.
Absolutely. That's awesome. Well, and the shows were great because I listened over 4th of July and all that. So you were able to drop different ones. So as far as Lake Tahoe goes and jet skis, it's one of my favorite things to do. But I'm curious, you have 3 kids. So
Yeah.
How did you divvy it up? Were they riding on your back? What was going on?
I'm glad you brought this up because it was very, very funny. We have a 15-year-old is our oldest, and none of the rental places in Lake Tahoe will allow a 15-year-old without a license to ride a jet ski by himself. But he's a super into dirt bikes and cars, and that's his whole world. And so he was devastated at the thought that he's going to have to be on the back with mom or dad. But the rule in Nevada is that if you are 14 with a boating safety license, you can do that if someone will privately rent you one. So my son during part of the vacation was on his computer for 3 days getting an official boat safety license, and we were able to get somebody to drop off a couple rentals, and he had the time of his life. So,
Oh,
yeah, the other two were very happy to be with a parent. They are 12 and 9 and happy to just go on the ride. But yes, the oldest one finally got his dream to come true, and he is the proud owner of a Nevada boat safety license that he will never use again, but
uh,
it was pretty fun.
that's awesome. I love it. That was about when I started riding jet skis. That's a blast. So very,
We
very
got to
cool.
do more of it for sure.
Yeah, I'm with you. It's been a long time actually for me, but very neat. Well, so you mentioned your three kids at 9, 12, 15. What is dad life like right now? How's it going?
It is so different from what it used to be. I'm adjusting. I turned 40 this year. Um, we'll probably talk a lot about life, but that has been the biggest like moment of adjustment is just my kids don't need me the way they used to need me. They're growing up so fast, and just the new challenges that come with having older kids. It's been really unique. I mean, it feels like it happened overnight. I know it's so cliche. It's the same thing every older parent said to us when we had little kids, but it's all true, right? Like the cliches are true. So, um, it's been adjusting to just maturing kids that need us in different ways, leading them in different ways, dealing with problems that are much different than they used to be, and just the next season of life. That seems to be the theme.
So as far as you got a lot on your plate, leading a company with your two
Yeah,
co-founders,
yeah.
co-hosts, and all that. But how do you balance sort of the family life and what have been some of the lessons learned along the way now that you've been in the game with a 15-year-old?
Yeah, I think that's always been something that we've had to be ultra consistent and committed to was like prioritizing the way we want the cadence of life to go. It's a daily challenge. It's something that when we started and we were responsible for everything in the company, like it's become easier actually over the years just to have people that we trust,
Mm,
employees that we trust, to be able to, I'm very type A. Like in the beginning, I wanted that firm grip of control over all these big decisions that were going to affect the brand and the growth and all these things. But God's taught me over the years through experience of just being able to entrust others with great expertise.
mm.
And we've been super blessed to find people that are not just good at their proficiency in the work, but good human beings that have similar priority structures. So we really try to balance that. And so a lot of that has been in trusting others, I think, and just making sure that that's at the forefront of how we think. It's challenging in a seasonal business, where you have certain peak times a year, but we also appreciate that seasonality because there is an ebb and flow. There's a development cycle. There's a high intensity, busy cycle for us is more before the season begins actually, because all of August we're creating content daily that isn't based on games that have been played. So that's the most challenging time of the year. It's when we do our live show. It's when we do press. It's when we do all of these. Everything is this tight little window. So, it's always a bit of a sprint during August, but then once the football starts, the content kind of creates itself, and it's a lot easier to react to it.
Man, that's good. Yeah, I'm in the middle of it. I've got a 5-year-old and 3-year-old daughter, and so navigating that a little bit behind you, I guess. But the two girls, they love your book, My Football
Oh,
Family. So we've been reading it.
that's
I've
fun.
actually been reading it with my 5-year-old last year or two. But so tell me about the just kind of how the idea for the book came about, and it's clever. I love the play on words and it's fun. So we've read it, gosh, a lot. We've read it a lot. I almost got it memorized, but how
Yeah,
did
that's
it come
cool.
together?
Yeah, I always had a desire to do something in books or publishing from a young age, and so when the opportunity arose to me, sports represents this connection point for both families, friendships, all of those things. That's what it represented as a fan growing up. Was like my dad and I watching Phoenix Suns games, or listening on the radio. Like those were my best memories, and so in a space like fantasy football and football where sometimes there can be a subculture of like you go down in the basement and hide from the family to watch the games. Like, I wanted to contribute something to the space that was more about the connection that I felt from sports and what I feel like our podcast tries to do, and being more of a positive influence in that direction, or a counterweight or whatever you want to call it. And so for me, it was an opportunity to express the best parts of sports. I think if I had gotten away with more of the editorial, I probably would have laid too many deep, thick fantasy football references into, like, my original manuscript had some more,
I'm
probably like
sure.
keeper league stuff in
Yeah.
there,
Yep.
but we had
Yep.
to soften that down a little bit. But yeah, it was just a real pure passion project. You know, it wasn't something with a huge agenda to get, make the book, the biggest thing I'm doing. It was just something that I had a really unique opportunity to partner with a great illustrator and a great publisher, and just put pen to paper on our experience. And they kind of did the illustrations around our family structure, so it's
I
like our
figured.
family. But
Yeah.
I never had asked for that. It was just something
Yeah.
that the illustrator had, like, when she was putting stuff together, she had just like snooped our family on Instagram or something. And so it was
Wow.
actually really special to see our family connecting over it in this hypothetical book and world, and extending out. So really cool experience to do that. Cool to have something out there that is representative of what kind of like we view the best parts of sports, which I think is, sports can be amazing, right? The competition and the camaraderie and the fandom and the connection, like, that is what it represents to me. So that's a lot of what inspired the book and what made me excited to contribute it.
That's cool. It's called My Football Family. So highly recommend it. And the last page with the girl, my two daughters now, they're fighting over who that is. And so they're both they see themselves in the book.
That's
So
awesome. That's awesome. That's cool to hear.
yeah, I get to be the blonde haired guy, which I guess is you at the end.
Yeah, there you go.
It's fun. Well, so as far as because that's an interesting concept. We talked a little bit about that when you came on last time, but the idea, because I'm guilty of this, to go down to my basement and watch football on Sunday. And in some ways, I've negotiated. That's my time. I get 3 hours every week to at least watch the 1 o'clock East Coast games. But for you, what does football Sunday look like? And you're in multiple leagues. And you got, we're all this way as fantasy managers. You got Stat Tracker, you got everything else. What is your strategy? What are you looking at? What are you keeping up with on Sundays?
Yeah, Sunday is wild. I mean, we always laugh because we've been doing this will be our 10th season, and we have our front lobby has got like 9 TVs up, and so we have Sunday ticket, and we'll put on every game, and we always marvel at how exhausted we are, having sat in a chair for however many hours to go through both.
Guilty.
You feel the same way. Yeah. Like,
Absolutely.
there is even the first 10 minutes of the day when the ball gets kicked off and there's all these games going, there's this like 10-minute acclimation to the overstimulus of like, where am I looking? How do I,
Oh, yeah.
did he do that? Okay. I'm calling this one out. Like, there is that whole, like, overstimulation that happens. And then you didn't do anything physical, but then I'm going home and I'm going, all right, I guess I'm glad it's over for the day, and I'm tired, and I didn't do anything. I might have ate ice cream while I watched these games, but I'm like overstimulated. But for our family, being out here in Arizona, the games start pretty early. We're fortunate where we have a church that has like an 8:30 service, so I'm able to like go with the family,
Nice.
which is that's always been hard to navigate, but be able to kind of go to that service, head out to the studio, take in all the games. And, sometimes my middle son, he's the bigger sports fan. Sometimes he'll come with me, and Mike has a son the same age. So they'll play football in the parking lot and watch games and play football. And we'll do bigger events, bigger games here at the studio. But yeah, I mean, it's something we have to do. We're talking about it the next morning, but taking all of that input in for so long, it's like exhilarating and fun and exhausting. And if the day goes well for your teams, you have a different emotional state. And so it's a balancing act.
Absolutely. Well, a couple things. So on one end, I've gotten to the point where I'm not necessarily riding every reception and I'm up 1 point, I'm down 1 point. I find after 20 years of playing fantasy, it's like, all right, I'll look at a little bit later. I'm just trying to watch the games. Where are you? I imagine that you've got to be in a similar spot.
Yeah, we've definitely adjusted more to that side of less holding it in front of your face and watching every matchup and game. If there's something tremendous on the line, the playoffs and stuff, it's harder to resist that temptation.
True, for sure.
You are rooting so granularly for everything. But with the show too, we're rooting for our teams. We're also rooting for our advice to be successful for our listeners.
That's right.
And maybe that even, I mean, that is definitely taking the priority over our own teams, but we also are hyper competitive. So it's a balance there where, the last thing I want to do is go out and make a prediction, which is, it's a prediction, and have it fall in its face and let people down. Like we wear that a lot, starts of the week and stuff. So, we are able now, I think, to sit back and not check the scores as often, but let it all come to us, take a breath. But it's fun. You kind of, you get burnt out at the end of the year and you're like, I'm so glad it's over.
Yep.
But then you get to this stage in July and the documentaries are coming out and things are coming out. And I'm like, I'm ready for it to be back. Like every year we get to that point where you're like, this is something special. Is it different than all the other sports? And I'm ready for it to come back.
Absolutely. I'm right there with you. And I want to ask you more about the need to be right. We talk about that in a little bit.
Yeah.
But going back to Sundays, so you're able to go to church. I have to imagine, though, it's challenging for you to go to church because everybody is coming up to you saying, hey, who do I start? Who do I start? How does that go for you?
Yeah, I mean, it is a natural byproduct of the job that we do. And I'll admit it is probably not the thing I always want to talk about, but it's something that other people want to talk about. But no, it's fun. And it's always been a challenge on Sundays in season since we started the job. It's just like a natural byproduct of this day that you want to be able to set aside, and you can't. Even if you decide you're going to miss time and miss games or whatever the case may be, it's still in the back of your mind. It's still something that's on your mind. So I feel like that's a weekly challenge for 10 years that I've had of just, can I put the phone away? Can I not pay attention to the news that's breaking in? Like there was a time a long time ago that wasn't an option, right? And now the phone's in your pocket, the watch. Oh, this guy's injured. It's like, that's a big challenge, but we're navigating it year by year.
That's it. No, it is. And I feel it too. You're trying to be in the moment in worship, and you get the buzz and
yeah.
Right?
I mean,
is that a breaking news? Is my starting running back out today? What's going on?
Yeah, so, it is.
That's the challenge we all face. Well, speaking of church, and we'll talk a little faith with you too, and we'll get back to some fantasy conversation as well. But just as far as this season of your life, and you mentioned a little bit from the dad perspective, in what ways has your faith been challenged, and in what ways is your faith growing right now?
Yeah, it's hard to not weave that into our parenthood journey, just with kids at the stages of life that they are, and how important the family life is to us, and being able to lead in a way that is faithful and responsible, and watching kids develop their own personalities and their own faith and their own journey. So, I mean, that's definitely interwoven. I think there's been this season in my life of aging and not having my identity wrapped up in being young, I guess would be a way to put it. Like, it's strange how much I realize being an entrepreneur and having success in business and things like that was wrapped up into my identity as being a young person doing that and having success with that. Not something I probably would have ever said out loud or acknowledged as like true until I've realized, you get older and you're no longer living in this state of what your potential is, but more like acceptance of where you are in life and where your family is and where things, my own parents, and it's just a very interesting time of life to live out. And the older you get, the more that you have a temptation to romanticize parts of your youth as well, I think, especially when it comes to faith. And, I became a believer in my late teens, and I have like a lot of incredible fond memories of being, before I was married, before I had kids, where this was all I was contributing my life to. And the older you get, you kind of romanticize the simplicity of those times. And that can kind of, I think, cause sort of a paralyzation in where you are now, right? Like if you're always looking backwards, you're not living presently in the way that you want to live. So I think some of those challenges have or opportunities to grow have presented themselves, and accepting being 40 years old, having our kids as old as they are, saying goodbye to the days that you're living with 5 and 3-year-olds that we all got the apps on our phone, right? That show us the what happened in the past, the flashback apps. And I see those, and my wife makes fun of me because I sit around and I listen to Ben Rector nostalgia music while I'm like watching pictures of our kids, and it's like she makes fun of me so much because like my Spotify release radar that comes out every week is like they'll just like Spotify will just find nostalgia songs to throw into my playlist, and she'll mock me because she'll get in the car and that's all they are.
That's
So
funny.
I don't know. I think that is just top of the head, just dealing with growing older and accepting the stage of life that you're in. And at the same time, even with the business, like we were a young, small, throwing my pin around here, a young, small business that, you're scrappy and you're in the upstairs bedroom and you're, everything is new and exciting and you're a startup. And then now we're 10 years old, right? And we've matured as a business. And so there's different, there's change. Is that the good summary of it all? Change.
There it is. That's it. And
yeah,
no, that's huge. And so along those lines too, you use the word identity, and I was thinking too the word idol. I was reading First John today, and at the end of it says don't embrace idolatry. But the concept of fantasy football, it's such a wonderful thing. I love it. It's great.
Yeah.
But just like we were joking about, even you're at church and you're worshiping, and it's like, wait, I'm worried about my fantasy team. How have you navigated and wrestled with the concept of fantasy football, for one, becoming an idol, becoming the main focus, becoming the priority of life, but then also success and growing a business and all that you guys have experienced and the rise in the fantasy world and the podcast world to the heights that you've gone to? How do you stay grounded in the midst of all that?
Yeah, I think that I think it's super challenging. I don't think I've ever been in a position where fantasy football itself has tempted, has brought itself to that place of being the potential idol. I don't think I like it that much. I really don't. But I think that the business, the success of the business, the routine of the business, those things can elevate themselves into that identity structure, and just who you are and what you do, and those things can be a daily challenge to make sure that you are focused on the right thing and not associating the routine with your identity. And it's just really, really challenging because I take a great deal of pride in what we do. We provide for our employees. I take a great deal of pride in that. But also just, we all have a certain amount of hours in the day. We all have a certain amount of brain space to commit to certain things. And so you have to be super intentional about saying no to a lot, mentally, emotionally, and then pragmatically with the business, I think, to have any chance up against the kind of tidal wave of success or whatever that is defined as in your life, right? Like I kind of think of I think it's First Timothy 6 talks about like taking hold, and it's talking to those rich in the present age, but about like taking hold of that which is truly life. And so there's the illusion that everything that we're doing in this world is truly life, and it's not, right? It's temporary. And so I think that verse and that kind of mindset has been very present in my head for a long time about like, am I getting sucked into this thing that isn't really life? And, or am I investing in that which doesn't spoil and is truly life, as the verse says? So, yeah, it's not going to happen by accident. You're not going to organically, naturally trend towards that which is truly life. You're going to trend the other direction, right?
True.
And so, and you have a lot more influences if you grow as a business, right? Whether it's, people that want you to do this, that, or the other thing for the success of the business. And so I'm very thankful. I think the greatest the greatest asset that we have is the united worldview of the three of us when it comes to how we function in a business. It would be I would say nearly impossible if there was a division at the leadership level of our company in terms of this is what I want out of this business. My net out of this business is this, and then mine is over here. Like that, there's no way for those diverting directions to convene in the right place.
Mm.
And I've been a part of businesses like that.
Mm.
You know, not as an owner, but as those that as somebody who witnessed multiple owners of a business with completely different worldviews and outcomes that they wanted, and it disintegrated. Like it was a success, and then it disintegrated over time. So, being on your guard about that and kind of having those resets as often as possible is the best layman's advice I can give. I mean, I have no answers. I have no perfect
No,
explanation on how to do that because I'm still trying to learn myself.
that's right. I'm right there with you for sure. And just from a day-to-day, week-to-week basis, as far as remaining grounded in your faith, what are the spiritual kind of disciplines, practices that are important to your growth and following Jesus and remaining close and in sync with him?
Yeah, I mean, I mean, I can go. You got the quick cliche answers of like being in the Word, and that's not. I mean, that should be the answer. But at the same time, I think what has helped a lot is having some deep friendships with people, whether it's in our church community or people growing up that, you can go and have conversations about these things with, that have spiritual wisdom to impart, counsel to give, coming from the same place. I think that's been the most fundamental help to me is having, close friendships with, former pastor that I can meet with on a regular basis. They can give me perspective. Somebody that is, further along in their life as a parent has been so invaluable to us that have gone through the teenage years as we enter them with our kids, and can speak wisdom into our lives from both experience and the scripture. So, I think regular practice is there, not pulling away from people that are going to tell you the truth and not just tell you you're doing really good and this is really cool. And that's, I think that's so valuable.
Love it. Absolutely. No question. And you mentioned your business partners, of course, the co-hosts on the show, Mike and Jason, and you guys are friends and also business partners. And I'm curious the importance of intentionally remaining friends, investing in the friendship while also experiencing growth in business and challenges and excitement, along the way through that lens as well. What have you learned from that now as we celebrate 10 years of the fantasy footballers?
Yeah. I mean, it is, I love those guys. And I think we did more life together 5, 6 years ago when our kids were little and it was like play dates. And now we've got kids that are in sports and Jason's kids are in theater and Mike's are in football. And like, so we probably don't see each other as often out of the studio as we used to, but the fondness for one another and the care for one another and empathy towards what the other people are experiencing, like it's always been that, if two people are on board for something important, but the other one is unsettled about it or doesn't feel comfortable, we're going to side with that person. We want that unanimous, moving forward together. So,
Mm,
um,
that's a
it,
big deal. That's a
the,
big deal.
yeah, it is. And I'm so thankful for it. Like I don't take it for granted at all. And I can't, I think any of us would the shirt off our back type of thing for one another and for our employees here who have been so incredible.
So I'm a big believer in the unity and unanimous as well. And I got good advice years ago because I run a ministry, and so I have a board of directors.
Yeah.
And in order for us to move forward and make big decisions, I long for the unity of the board. That
Yeah.
it's not a 5-4 vote.
Right.
No, we got to all be on board here. And especially as we serve the same Lord, it's like, hey, if the Lord's leading us a direction, it should be the same direction. Otherwise,
Right.
we're something here. So
Yeah. And it is such peace of mind when you can have that. And it doesn't mean that every decision goes that way. Right. But sometimes you just, no or not yet have been the most important answers, not the yeses. Right. Like we've had lots of opportunities as a business over the years, the no's, the not yet, the maybe laters, the let's take our time. Those have been the most valuable steps towards having success or an influence.
it's great. So you celebrate 10 years, and I saw you posted on LinkedIn
Right.
a few months ago, 6 kind of takeaways.
I forgot about that.
Yeah, so maybe I'll put you on the spot here, but a couple of the things that jumped out to me. One, you said add value and stay humble. So what does that mean, and how have you been able to stay humble through all of this?
talking about humility in general is very difficult. But I think if you don't have an ambition to stay grounded, you're probably going to have more failure in that area than if you have that ambition and still fail sometimes. So I certainly do not profess perfection in that area, but I do have an ambition to remain humble in the way that we speak, in the way that we talk to our listenership, the way that we view them, the way that we view ourselves in terms of, let's not put up a pretend view that we are something extraordinary, right? Just because we talk fantasy football all day long and people listen to the show. I mean, those are all things that can become trappings, I suppose. So I just think having an ambition to view what we do, why we do it, and the people we're talking to the exact same way that we did on day one is just like a good place to start for our show. And try to have that ambition. So, I mean, it's as simple as that for me. And I don't know if we do it well all the time, but that's the ambition,
No, it's an enjoyable listen. And yeah, you guys aren't, it's not, look how great I am. Look at all that I know. And I also listen to other fantasy radio, and there's plenty of that out there. So you get some of that.
We had experienced a lot of that, to be honest. We, even our like DFS side projects with the other guys that we employ, it's like DFS for the rest of us. So like we had experienced talk radio that was like, how dare you ask that question? How stupid is that question that you asked? Like that was something that we had called into shows and received. So I think we were very diametrically opposed to that kind of a mindset. And hopefully we are representing the other side.
That's right. And I think that's why so many people listen. And along those lines, you brought it up earlier, and I was going to bring it up again, the desire to be right. So you want to remain humble.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
We don't have all the answers.
And take your victory laps, right?
But you want to be right. You want to nail the breakouts, the sleepers, the top picks. And you also want to be right compared to your other two buddies.
I was going to say it is competitive. And so that's a part of it. I think being right in their faces is a fun, enjoyable, with your friends type of thing.
The closer the friend, the more it's enjoyable.
Yes. And we are, the show would not be the same if we didn't want to rub each other's noses in their rights and wrongs. But at the same time, it's also not wanting to be embarrassed. I think that's a part of it too, right? Like part of it is, what do I want more? Do I want to like be right more, or do I want to not be embarrassed more, or what's the middle ground there? Like I think is both sides of the coin.
Yeah. So you guys are competitive just as you're talking about certain players and all that.
Yeah.
You're also in the same, at least one league together. How many different leagues are you guys in together where you're actually
all the ones we care about? Yeah.
Okay.
All the ones we care about, we're sharing those leagues together. We're competitive. We're competitive out of fantasy football. If we're playing pickleball, or we used to play in flag football leagues, or we play shuffleboard, or we play, whatever we do, ping pong. We're going to just cornhole. Oh my gosh. We had multi-year Christmas party with the company cornhole competitions where they were very enjoyable and exciting and fun, and thankfully not broadcast onto YouTube.
Probably for the best.
Yeah.
That's pretty good. So of the leagues that you were in last year, how many did you win any of them that you with those two guys?
Last year I won the league of record. So that was the first time in 10 years. So it had been a while. I had like multiple championship game losses. That's a bad feeling. Last year, Mike won the Dynasty League. He beat me in the Dynasty League final, and I won our league of record for the first time in a while. And then Jason won nothing.
And you love that. That's great.
And so there you go. And that's what it is.
That's awesome. No, that's fun. Well, all right, we'll talk a little bit more fantasy. I still got to ask you maybe a player or two that we got to keep an eye out for, of course, as we listen to your podcast each week, but also coming up every day. So what day does that start when you're on every day?
August 1st. Yeah, August 1st will start every day until the end of the football season.
Yes, then we'll really lock in. So I usually get you about once a week because I mow the lawn once a week. So that's my time to listen to podcasts.
There you go. Yeah.
Is mowing. So in the summer, I'm got to
put more grass in, and you can maybe catch us a couple days.
Well, I still do the push mower. So it takes me, a decent
Okay.
amount. So
Okay.
get the full show in.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. But I'm curious, we talk about 10 years, you guys have been a part of the fantasy football industry,
Yeah.
and it's probably a full podcast, but just some high level takeaways. In what ways have you seen the positives of fantasy football, the growth, the change, and just sort of as you project the future of the fantasy football community, culture, industry, what are maybe some of the concerns? Positives, negatives, where do you stand?
Yeah, I mean it's a big broad question. It's changed a lot. Content creation has changed tremendously. The barrier to entry in that space has changed tremendously. So, when we first came in, we thought we were late. It's funny. It's 10 years. We thought we were late. It was the big players. It was CBS and ESPN and they had prominent, shows, but there weren't a lot of smaller shows. There wasn't Instagram Reels and TikTok and, YouTube content. And so accessibility of content, there's no shortage of content in fantasy football. So that's been a dramatic change since the time that we began. We also began in a time in which the DFS and sports betting landscape was non-existent, or if it was unregulated, and we didn't really, even touch the outskirts of that space because of the lack of regulation and protections for consumers. And so there were like a bunch of companies that were doing unregulated stuff in the space, and then the governors started shutting down sports betting, and so all those companies lost their money and they went out of business and they didn't exist, and then regulation came. And so the translation of all of that through the fantasy space has been interesting. It's been I think a financial driver for a lot of startups and different companies to get off the ground with whether it's DFS or best ball or some of the different regulated sports areas. So that's been an interesting thing to watch. Mostly from the sidelines, but also like talking to other like-minded professionals in the industry and what they see happening and how they're adjusting to it. So, technology has changed, which has allowed more complicated gaming. It's not like I grew up playing fantasy football with a newspaper or, with touchdown only leagues. You have tons of different platforms and software to be able to track your league or have complicated rule sets. So those things have made, you know, aiming your content at the right kind of space a little bit more difficult, I think, because everybody likes a different thing. But those are kind of the high level things that I think I've noticed the most over the last handful of years is just the amount of creators entering the space, the type of content, the platforms, and then the sports betting regulation side.
It's interesting. Yeah, there's a lot of layers there, and
Yeah.
I'm curious your thoughts too, because you guys focus mainly on
Redraft. Yeah.
redraft season long, which is
Yep.
great, and that's my favorite. I
Yep.
love that. I will say though, I'm a huge auction guy, and
Yep.
why don't you think auction drafts are more prominent? They're gaining a little steam, but why aren't they as prominent?
They aren't as prominent for a couple of reasons. I can make the jovial comment of just like auction drafts take an eternity. And I think that there's a part of that that's true. People draft online, like it's a harder mechanism to navigate, but you
They
don't
have to
like.
lock in the whole
But
time.
that's not the main reason. I think the main reason is because it separates casuals from sharks to a greater degree. And
Very
because
true.
of that, it's not as prominent because it's very easy to invite somebody to a quick redraft league or a church league or a family league. Everybody's kind of on the same playing field. You can go grab a cheat sheet. I know you could do that with an auction league, but the mechanism of really making those decisions is a lot harder than following a cheat sheet. It is. It's a more advanced strategy. It's how am I going big players and scrubs. I think that there's just a little bit more of a learning curve, so it hasn't become as mainstream, but the auction people are enthusiastic and hardcore. It's just a smaller amount. So, I mean, we get that question for 10 years. It's like, why don't you talk more auction? Why don't
Yeah.
you talk more, dynasty? And, we're kind of an everyman show. And we feel like the advice we give on players holistically will help people in dynasty and auction. But if we gave specific dynasty and auction advice all the time, it would not help people in redraft. So it's a tough thing. We try to have special days when we might do a dynasty week or auction articles, but it's a tough balance to please everybody in that way. But those are the reasons I think. I don't know if you agree.
Yeah, I think in some ways people are just used to doing the snake drafts, and sometimes people don't like change.
They probably don't even know. Yeah. I mean, there are people that stay in touchdown leagues because it's how they've always done them. It's hard to get over that, like just re-roll the exact same thing. And I get it. I mean, our league's like 17 years old, and getting somebody to get rid of kickers was like an obstacle that was very difficult to overcome.
Oh, yeah. We got rid of kickers a number of years ago. And I always laugh at people that tell me, oh, yeah, we still have kickers. What are you doing? Come on.
I know. We don't even know their names anymore. And we're proud of that.
That's me. Same with me. Same with me. I'm right there with you. All right. Last thing we'll get to. And again, you can hear more of Andy's takes on his normal podcast, The Fantasy Footballers. So check it out. But I'll just ask this question. What players are you most excited? We're in the middle of July. Who are you most excited to draft? Of course, you'll have your My Guys episode in a few weeks, but right now, give us a little teaser on some guys that excite you.
Yeah, I mean, I'll probably say a different name than I've been saying on the show, just to make it different. But like I couldn't, and it's a homer thing, but I don't think it is. Like the Marvin Harrison Jr. experience this year is going to be extraordinary. Like this is a pro. This is a pro coming into the league.
You're a Cardinals fan.
And I'm a Cardinals fan. Sorry, yes. So I'm invested in the next Larry Fitzgerald, we hope, in Arizona. I'm really excited because I think this is the highest drafted rookie that we've seen in terms of fantasy draft spot. And then obviously very high in the NFL draft. So I'm so excited to see what happens with him. There are some other players that like I keep bringing up on the show, like Calvin Ridley in Tennessee, who everything we do on our podcast, just so people understand, it's liking a player, but it's liking a player based on where they're going in fantasy drafts. It's not just, I think they're going to have a good season. There are a lot of players that I think are amazing and going to have a good season and won't end up on my fantasy team because they're too expensive, right? And that happens a lot of the time. Like Sam Laporta is an awesome tight end in Detroit, but his draft cost is so high that he won't end up on my team. That's what Calvin Ridley's the inverse of that. I think he's going too far away in drafts. People are ignoring him. They think he's too old. They don't like Will Levis. So he's a player that's on that list for sure that I think will probably end up on my guy. Spoiler alert. Will probably end up on a lot of my teams if his draft position doesn't go higher. So those are a couple names that I'm really excited about at the wide receiver position.
Very cool. Actually, I listened back to the time we had you on 4 years ago. You liked Calvin Ridley then?
So did I really?
Yeah.
That would have been Atlanta, right? That would have been Atlanta.
Was he a rookie? He wasn't a rookie. It was early.
It probably was his second year, I'm guessing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And everyone was expecting big things. I think he got hurt. I think he got hurt
that year. Yeah. So
that's funny. There you go. 4 years later, maybe I need to let go of this guy. My goodness.
Man, that's your guy. That's your guy.
Apparently.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Well, Andy, man, so great to have you on and really fun to catch up with you and congrats on 10 years as a listener for, gosh, I've been listening a long time. So excited for you guys and
thank you.
Thankful that you're willing to come on and talk a little faith and life. And so enjoy the next couple months. Yeah.
Thanks for doing what you're doing and integrating, something that's our passion here, fantasy football, with the fellowship aspect. I think, we brought it up earlier, community and connection. Like there are a lot of people that are in my life because of fantasy football still, you know what I mean? From school or for wherever. So it is a good opportunity to get people together, and what you're doing to unite faith and fantasy is awesome.
Thank you. No, we appreciate that, Andy. Well, man, we'll do it again. Wish you the best. He's Andy Holloway from the Fantasy Footballers, thefantasyfootballers.com. Anywhere podcasts are found, you got them. So enjoy and listen to them, and we appreciate what they do. So glad to have him on today. All right, I'm Bryce. I'm a sports fan who follows Jesus. I believe in the good news that he died on the cross for my sin. He was resurrected, and through faith, I've been saved by his grace. I hope that is true for you as well, and I hope you'll join me as we live life as sports fans who follow Jesus together. Have a great rest of your day. Be sure to check out fantasyfootballfellowship.com. Check out unpackingit.com, and we'll talk to you next time right here on the Unpacking It podcast and also the Fantasy Football Fellowship podcast. Special episode today. Thanks for being with us.